Welcome into episode 367 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, we are recording on Veterans Day. So before we go any further with the podcast, just want to thank all the veterans who have served our country, past and the present. And obviously, I think a lot of people, maybe most people, know somebody who has at one point or another served. So thank you to all the veterans. And yeah. So the most recent Bruins game was absolutely brutal. Bridget and Scott, they fall to the Senators in overtime, and we'll break it all down. That doesn't sound brutal on the surface, but when you pull back the layers, it was a pretty brutal, certainly, last 40 minutes of the game or last 35 plus for sure. So let's get right into it. Opening shifts.
Yeah, so Mayan connects to part of that brutality, which was an absolutely horrendous third period in which the Bruins did not land a single shot on goal. They got outshot 12-0 in a tied game. We're lucky to get to overtime and get a point, honestly. They got out-attempted 22-5 in the period. The whole period was played at even strength. It was all 5-on-5, and they just looked gassed. They were getting out-hustled all over the ice by Ottawa, who is, not exactly one of the best teams in the league. Led to a tense, I would say, post-game press conference with Jim Montgomery. It lasted all of like a minute and a half. The first question was about, whether a bad power play late in the second period did that maybe deflate the team heading into the third. He said, I don't know. You'd have to ask the players. They would have a better feel for that. I asked why third periods have been an issue because they have. The Bruins are the worst third period team in the NHL this season. Worst third period goal differential, second worst shot differential. Montgomery said, I don't know. I don't have an answer. He was asked a follow-up. What does he plan to do to address it? He said, talk about it, figure out why, look at what we're doing sports science-wise. We'll come up with answers. Right now, I don't have one. I asked him, is conditioning an issue or endurance? He said, we thought so during camp, but we don't think so anymore. Someone else asked, do you question whether the players are listening? He says, no, I don't question that. So what's preventing the message from getting through to them? And Montgomery says, it's up for you guys to figure that out and come up with the reason. We just weren't good enough. You can write what you guys think is the malaise on the team and what's going wrong. We're just not playing good enough. And that was it.
And Scott loved that he used the word malaise.
It's a good word, for sure. Not good when your team is in one, though, which the Bruins have been much of the season. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to react to there. But clearly I would say there's been a bunch of times this season where Jim Montgomery has sounded very frustrated and exasperated. And I think Saturday night kind of took the cake in terms of sounding like someone who doesn't have answers and almost like just doesn't know where to turn for them at this point.
Yeah, no, and it was tense. So when we were in there, and post game, like if the Bruins lose, you have to run downstairs as fast as possible because he like walks like a stormtrooper as fast as he can into the press conference room, and I just barely made it in time yesterday. But yeah, it was definitely tense, and part of that's Scott's fault, right, Scott?
Not my fault. I'm not the reason that they're playing like shit.
Scott asked some tough questions. Yeah, but I mean, it was when you get outshot 12-0 in the third period, there's going to be questions about, stamina. It's fair. It's fair. Now we can get more into that later. One player that I think, and you mentioned, Scott, like I think it was Kevin Paul DuPont that asked if it's because players haven't been listening or the message isn't getting through. Well, we talked about this last episode, and I'm going to bring it up again now. Nikita Zadorov seemed like someone that maybe the message isn't getting through to all the time. And he had a play where he completely screened Swayman. He was skating backwards to try to get back on defense, but he skated directly in front of Swayman's vision, and I believe that was the game tying goal, the second goal that they scored. And I saw him go to the bench after and just chuck his stick like kind of onto the bench / like down the tunnel where they come out. And their equipment guy had to go chase it down and get the stick back. But I mean, you can see the frustration level from certain guys. And I think a lot of it comes from knowing what the job is and not being able to execute it the right way. And I don't think it was stamina, endurance, whatever. I think it's just the execution hasn't been there. And that was one of those plays where you saw that and it ends up in a goal and ends up being the reason why the game goes to overtime.
Yeah, Zadorov was also way out of position on the first goal. On the penalty kill, he chases the puck all the way to the corner, and Josh Norris is just standing all by himself with no one within 10 feet of him.
Yeah, well, also on that first goal for Ottawa, yes, Scott, you're right. Zadorov went chasing, okay? But I rewatched it this morning, and you know what happened before that? Charlie Coyle lost a straight-up 50-50 puck battle to Brady Tkachuk. Matter of fact, I would say that Coyle should have had the initial jump on it, but he's hesitant. He's looking at over his shoulder who he's going up against, and Coyle he loses that battle, and then Zadorov in a reactionary manner goes chasing. So I'll blame Zadorov in that play too, but I'm going to blame Charlie Coyle as well, in addition to the rest of the players on the ice. But and then the goal that you're talking about, Bridget. Yeah, Zadorov is frustrated, but again, went back and watched it, and I think a theme with the Bruins defense this year is they're giving up the blue line way too easily. And as a defenseman, you're going to give up the blue line easier or have a larger gap between you and the incoming forward in transition when your forwards aren't applying enough back pressure. So when your forwards are slow to back check, you're going to give them that buffer so that they aren't getting by you. Because if you know that your forwards are back checking appropriately and you step up at the blue line and you get beat, then you know that your forwards are, I think someone's mowing the lawn at EEI or Bridget's house maybe, but either.
My mic was off, so.
But in any event,
Scott just decided he's blending a smoothie right now.
Scott,
that's actually Jim Montgomery's blender. We're getting ready for practice over at Warrior.
I like that, Scott. But just to finish the thought, yeah, if you're a defenseman, if you know that your forwards are back checking and you get beat, you know that your forwards are there to cover you. Far too often the Bruins forwards aren't back checking intensely enough, and so the defense are giving up the blue line. That goal in particular, Bridget, the Bruins forwards were actually in a change, so it was the same effect. There was no back check pressure, but it's because they were changing. So Zadorov and McAvoy, they give up the blue line as to not get beat and give up like a 4-0 or whatever, and then there's a screen that you mentioned. So I think Zadorov's frustration may be with himself, and also with the fact that he and McAvoy kind of got left to dry there and put them in a bad position. So we can talk about all that as well. My opening shift, Bridget and Scott, is maybe in a naive manner, a bit of a glass half full approach this morning, because believe me when I tell you, nobody is outside of the Bruins dressing room. Nobody is, more angry and frustrated with what they're watching than myself. I mean, I see it all. I think it's, quite frankly, it's unacceptable, their play and their effort and their execution. That said, I had the thought cross my mind yesterday. I was like, man, this Bruins team is playing so bad. I think that they're absolutely playing at their floor. And I look at the standings and they're still in a playoff position, and they're still a 500 team. Now, I know over the course of 82 games, 500 hockey is not getting you to the postseason. I know that. And I know that they have games in hand on players, on teams. But the simple question crossed my mind. What if this team just played a little bit closer to what they're capable of? Like the fact that they're 500 right now, they should be thanking the heavens, because they should not be a 500 hockey team, and they are. So
Yeah, and they're in third place.
If they can improve a little bit, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're in third place in the Atlantic. Like, they're in a playoff position right now, which kind of sounds crazy when you look at the standings. Like, and everybody always talks about the barometer for making the playoffs being check where everybody is at Thanksgiving, and we're only 2 weeks away from that. And currently they're in a playoff spot somehow. But Scott, you were saying this before we started recording. It's because there's just not a lot of good teams in the East. There's a lot of really bad teams in the East this year.
Yeah, like if you look at the Eastern Conference, there's, I would say, 7 teams that I would say are good. Not even like really good, just good hockey teams right now. So, like, starting from the top, Carolina, Florida, Rangers, Capitals seem, I don't know if I'm fully buying in, but man, are they off to a good start, and they're playing well. Toronto, New Jersey, Tampa. Like, there's your 7. It's wide open after that. Like, there's one more playoff spot just completely up for grabs. And you're there at 500. Buffalo, the Islanders, Ottawa is 500. Detroit's just under. They've been playing like some really bad hockey, getting badly outshot every night. I don't think anyone believes in Pittsburgh, Columbus, Philly, or Montreal. So, yeah, like I was saying before we started recording, like, in the words of the great Lou Merloni, can you just suck a little? Like, if you're just okay, you're gonna make the playoffs, because I don't believe in any of those other teams. Now, obviously, that leads to like a bigger conversation about, like, all right, well, is it good enough to just make the playoffs if you're not playing good hockey? Like, what does that really do for you if you just get knocked out in the first round by Florida or Carolina? But yeah, it's like you clearly still have something to play for. Like, you haven't fallen off, right? I think the fear is if you get off to a bad start, and like we all think by Bruins standards, this is a bad start. The real fear is like you fall 4, 6, 8 points out of a playoff spot, and you're trying to play catch up the rest of the year. That's tough. Like, that at least has not happened. Like, you're still right there. If you can just get yourself on track, you're going to be fine in terms of having something to play for, at least.
Yeah, I mean, they're holding on. Now, obviously, if you look at points percentage, they're not quite as high in position, because right now they have more points, even though other teams are 500. Like, Ottawa's 500, but they have fewer points because they played fewer games. But either way, I guess, Brian, I'm a little bit surprised you're the glass half full guy after the text that you sent last night. So
whoa. There's on air, then there's pre-production text. Okay,
not with Bridget. There's no secrets.
But you know what though, Bridget, you can bring it up because it's fair. It's totally fair. What I texted Bridget and Scott was essentially, I'll be honest, like I don't know if this team is a playoff team this year. Like, and the reason I say that is because we're talking about how they're still in a playoff position, but we're also saying that they're lucky to be so. Like, their play is so dismal in every metric, every category. And I also think the coaching hasn't been great. And I'm not blaming the coaching. I think this falls on the players, and I think Jim Montgomery is coaching the roster he was given. But the stubbornness with the power play and the special teams, I believe, is definitely on the coaching staff. The players play, but if I wanted to pick something about the coaching, I would say that the stubbornness and on the unwillingness to make changes on the power play, especially with Charlie McAvoy up top. I think you add Hampus Lindholm as a left shot defenseman who can get pucks through. That should be a very easy adjustment at this point in the season. We've seen enough of McAvoy at the point on the power play, at least the top unit, and there are systemic things on the power play in zone and via entries that Jim Montgomery and Chris Kelly either aren't implementing or the players aren't executing, but I think it's the former. So just the entire operation looks terrible. And we mentioned some other 500 teams, the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa Senators have missed the postseason 7 years in a row. Now, a lot of that's because they're young with skill, but not enough experience in defensive prowess and a lack of goaltending. They have Linus Ullmark now. But the Senators, to Scott's point earlier, they're not the greatest team in the league. They're an average team, but yet they appear to possess far more skill and speed than the Bruins in that game. So even among the 500 teams, the Bruins are looking sluggish and slow. And the Bruins haven't showed me, guys, to this point, any signs of consistency or signs of optimism that they're just going to snap out of it. And if they don't, then they're not going to make the playoffs because the league is too competitive. I know the East has been weak so far this year, but so I think right now, if you were to ask me, I'd say like maybe like I'm probably 55-45 Bruins make playoffs versus don't. And that's just based off of not so much what I've seen. It's based off of, me giving them respect for what they've done over time. But I think right now it's definitely it's a dicey time for the team.
Yeah, and maybe just a few of them snap out of it first, right? Like maybe one at a time they snap out of it, and all of a sudden you start seeing a little bit more offense and a little bit more flow to the games and confidence. And somebody that kind of seems to be snapping out of it is Pavel Zacha, at least. Like they got him going, and he scored again against Ottawa. He looks better. And usually when he's playing better and when he's on a line with David Pastrnak, then Pastrnak starts playing better too. And that is someone that you definitely need to get going, and that line needs to get going. And Brian, I think you wanted to bring this up. Maybe not, and maybe I'm bringing up something else that we're not talking about. But what, Scott?
I was gonna say, but before we shift to that, because I know where you're going, I was gonna say one area where I think there is actually some encouraging signs is 5-on-5 defense, which like Montgomery and players have said, we feel like we're finding our structure, and they are. Like their 5-on-5 defense has been pretty good recently. They now rank in the top 10 in the NHL in 5-on-5 goals against, expected goals against, high danger chances against, and 5-on-5 save percentage from their goaltending. So they are actually doing a pretty good job 5-on-5 preventing chances and goals. Of course, they are not generating anything offensively 5-on-5. So that's the problem. Like that's the next step that has to come, right? Like we talk all the time about how this is a team built from the back end, defense and goaltending. Okay, so if you're finding that at 5-on-5, then you should be able to build your offense from that. And right now there's still a disconnect where preventing chances, killing plays in the D zone is not leading to them getting out and attacking and then creating chances at the other end. So that's obviously still needs to happen. And then special teams are just a mess. Like that if you look at like goal differential, they're actually a +1 at 5-on-5 now, which is not great. Like eventually you're going to want to be better than that, but you're smack middle of the pack, breaking even at 5-on-5. They're just getting killed on special teams. They're just totally underwater. They're a -10 special teams net on the season. They've given up the most shorthanded goals in the NHL, 16, which obviously is in large part a product of the fact that they've taken the most penalties in the NHL. Teams just have too many opportunities against them. So there's like that one little thing that I would cling to as a sign of optimism. But yes, then still way too many problems all around it.
And it's fair to bring up, Scott, because it's tough to see the forest through the trees sometimes with some of the small things they are doing well because special teams is such a major component of a game, and you combine their special team struggles with their lack of offensive anything, generation, execution, anything, and it's easy to overlook. Well, their 5-on-5 defensive metrics they're actually climbing, and I'm glad you bring that up because it's probably even more so impressive that they're climbing on their defensive 5-on-5 numbers because they're spending so much time defending 5-on-5. Like, think about how tired you probably get when you're constantly defending, right? When your team's not on your toes and you're not pressing the other team, you're on your heels. So to have impressive and climbing 5-on-5 defensive numbers as a team while mainly just defending that is worth noting, Scott. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Before we go further into the game, Bridget, why don't we go to what you were going to bring up?
Yes. So what I was saying was, Zacha starting to look better. Maybe that helps Pastrnak start to get more production. And, Pastrnak has gotten criticism in the early parts of the season for making some plays that maybe seemed lax or like turnovers and not scoring at the same rate that he does or he has in the past. And there was a report that came from out yesterday, I believe, from a Czech journalist who he is there, like he has been there this week. He spoke to Pastrnak actually after last game. Obviously, we don't speak Czech, so when we hear it being spoken, we don't know what it means. But I believe Ty Anderson, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, was the one who kind of like ran it through the story through a translator, and it was about Pastrnak saying maybe there was a little bit more to the offseason injury that was kind of lightly reported a few months ago, but there's a little bit more to it, and that has something to do with him having a slower start.
Yeah, the first place I saw this was I saw on Twitter yesterday, earlier in the day, a screen capture from a David Pastrnak Facebook page, which allegedly is his page, but then you go to it and it's like updating like mid-game goals. I'm like, well, I don't think David's on Facebook during the game. So I kind of like was maybe this is just one of those fake accounts. But Ty Anderson mentioned that well, there was a quote on that page basically saying that he dealt with an injury in the summer that went on longer than he thought, and it was tougher on him mentally than anything. And the moral of the story is, even though he told Scott in camp he felt 100%, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but he wasn't able to get a full training session in. And Ty Anderson pretty much confirmed that the quote from that Facebook page was true, although he doesn't know the merits of the page.
Yeah, so the article is on the NHL.com Czech site, and you can run it through Google Translate, and obviously, like, you always have to take Google translations with a grain of salt. Sometimes, what someone says in their native language doesn't exactly have like a one-to-one meaning. But basically, Pastrnak's quote in the story was that he had an injury that kept him off the ice for a month and a half this summer, and that he felt like it was still affecting him at the start of this season, but that he feels like he's been getting better and better every game now. To back this up, and I think what you guys have alluded to a little bit, is right after the World Championships, when Pastrnak helped the Czech Republic win gold on home ice in Prague, there were Czech reports then, and again, all we can do is run it through Google Translate, that referenced an injury that he was dealing with that might require surgery. And it was like, that's weird. Like, Don Sweeney told us no one needed off-season surgery. And then I think when we talked to Sweeney again before the start of camp, he said that there had been no surgeries other than the 3 that Brad Marchand had. That was the only thing that had changed since the end of the season. And I was like, okay, so I guess Pastrnak didn't have surgery. And then what you were referencing, Brian, I asked Pastrnak about that during training camp, and what he told me was that he had some bruises and bumps that kept him off the ice a couple weeks, but that it was actually, he said the timing was actually kind of convenient because it was at the same time as his wedding, and he probably wasn't going to be on the ice anyways. So it wasn't really a big deal. And he said that at that point, that was the end of September, he said he felt 100%. So obviously these quotes indicate that it was, a little more than he was letting on at the time. He told me a couple weeks. He tells this Czech journalist a month and a half, which is, more than a couple weeks, and says it was still affecting him. So, I guess like my read on this is probably that, maybe he did feel fine in training camp and thought he was past it. But being off the ice, maybe affected him more than he anticipated. Like you just don't know what that stuff. Like sometimes someone feels right physically, but because it threw off their off-season routine, they're not ready for the season in the same way that they normally would be. Like these guys have such kind of like tight regiments that they stick to that when you throw it off a little, like it's absolutely possible that it could affect him, and maybe even still is, although he says he's feeling better now.
I guess we truly won't know. I think at the end of the day, it's how are we supposed to react as fans and media to that? I mean, it's okay. That's unfortunate. But you're a leader on a team and you need to step up and be a leader because everybody goes through injuries over the course of a season. And I don't want to, I understand what he's saying that's, if it threw his summer regimen off, that's unfortunate. If he's dealing with the lingering thing, it's unfortunate, but it's the old adage, if you're on the ice, you're good enough to play, then you have to be held accountable for how you're playing out there. And that's just where I'll leave it. Like I'm not gonna, and nobody here is, but I'm not gonna hear this news and be like, oh, well, that makes sense why he's, not skating as hard as he should be. Maybe to explain some of his lack of confidence and second guessing with, in grade A chances, maybe. But as far as the little details of the game, that should be. But yeah,
that's what I think. It's like when you think about like, okay, how has he been playing different? It's like, yeah, he's not this. His confidence level certainly doesn't seem like it's as high as it's been in the past, and so maybe that contributed to it. But hopefully, that's just something that he works through as the season gets going, and the slow start, even if this just explains a little bit of it, it's just not going to linger, because as he gets more games, he feels better, hopefully, and mentally, like he's able to get himself back on the schedule that he's normally on. And yeah, so interesting, because we still don't have a whole lot of like concrete information about it, because we still, we haven't had like a formal answer. We kind of go through some of the smoke screen a little bit.
And one other thing here, like, and tying this back to some of Montgomery's post-game comments, is like, I think it's becoming increasingly clear that this training camp was basically just a disaster, start to finish.
It was terrible.
It just seems like so many things went wrong or were off in camp that clearly lingered into the start of the regular season. And like we've talked about injuries, which were the obvious one, right? Like Brad Marchand missed the start of camp. Elias Lindholm missed a week and a half in the middle of it. Patra missed the end of it. There might have even been other ones. Max Jones. Like Swayman obviously holding out, like not being there at all.
Right.
Like, so like there's all that, but now like we find out like, oh, Pastrnak may not have been 100%, even though he was on the ice the whole time. I still think there was something going on with Coyle, because he didn't play till the 5th game, and Jim Montgomery said it's good we can finally get him into a game. And it's like, well, what was the reason you couldn't get him into any of the first 4? So I still think there was something there. And now you have Montgomery admitting, when I asked the question about conditioning, that they thought conditioning was off in camp. And it's like, that could be as simple as guys were banged up, so their conditioning wasn't where it needed to be. Or that could be an even bigger problem of like, did you just get the plan wrong in terms of how you tried to get the team ready for the season? And guys just weren't at the level, like, like it doesn't have to be like the Herb Brooks training camp, right? Like where you're just doing sprints the whole time, but there is a level of physical conditioning that has to happen to get a team ready for the season. And I think it seems to me like pretty fair to wonder if that happened.
Well, the three of us were at training camp, and I don't, I wasn't very impressed with necessarily the structure of I didn't think it was the most, and when I say the most, it wasn't a very competitive, endurance driven camp. It was kind of like, it looked like a captain's practice, like everybody getting back onto the ice and getting their touches. It wasn't very like, let's go. We're playing the defending Stanley Cup champions in 2-3 weeks. It was just kind of, and look, you can look at every situation individually and explain it away. Pastrnak may have been a, world championship injury. Martian's coming off of surgeries. Coyle could have, tweaked something working out in Foxborough off the ice. Who knows? But like Lindholm, maybe he got a bad luck injury in the first period of a preseason, like whatever. But still, as a team, when you're off from, when you got eliminated in April and you don't hit the ice again as a team in September, and you got 5 guys entering camp, not at 100%, it's like, that's either the shittiest luck in the world, or it's like, I think they got to take a look at how they're handling the offseason. I don't know. Like, how do you enter camp after 5-6 months off with, that many injuries? Maybe it's just bad luck, and it starts and ends there. But in any event, guys, I do want to, I kind of want to bring this back to the game and some of the questions and storylines that are in the wake of it. And Bridget mentioned earlier, the Bruins got outshot 12-0 in the third period. True statement. I want to peel it back a little bit further. Brad Marchand gave the Bruins the 2-1 lead with 14 minutes and 53 seconds left in the second period. From that moment until Brady Tkachuk ended the game, in just over 30, around 36 minutes of game time, so the remainder of the second period, all of the third, and overtime, the Bruins had 4 shots on goal. So none in the third, 3 in the second after Marchand scored, and then 1 in overtime, the Elias Lindholm shot, with great save by Allmark, by the way, on that. Predictable, because Marchand didn't come with any speed, so I think Allmark had a chance to read that pretty quickly, but great save nonetheless. Good execution. You get outshot 12-0 in the third in a 2-2 hockey game on home ice. You get outshot, and for the record, I think I had Ottawa's numbers in front of me, but Ottawa had, I think it was 20-4. I think it was in that same stretch. Yeah, it was outshot. They were outshot 20-4. So when Boston took the 2-1 lead, the rest of the game, 24 in shots in favor of Ottawa on home ice against a, average Ottawa team. Absolutely unacceptable. I don't care if you have 23 of the best players in the world or the worst players in the world. That is straight out getting outworked, out executed, out coached, out everything. So, I know there's going to be a lot of chatter about, is it time for a coaching change? Is it time for that? Doesn't really, like, that's just unacceptable no matter how you break it down.
Yeah, it is. It's the first time they've gone without a shot in the third period of a game. Kevin Paul Dupont had this stat since December 2006, which was the dark days of Dave Lewis. Like, anytime you're doing something that hasn't been done since that team, you're in a bad spot. But yeah, like, it was just awful. It was just like a complete collapse where it was like, it's almost not that it's like ever acceptable to have a period like that, but when it's the first period, you can chalk it up to just a slow start, like whatever, you weren't ready for puck drop or whatever, and then if you recover as the game goes on, maybe you can write it off. Second period, we see all the time teams kind of have a lull in the second period.
Long change.
Yeah. It feels much worse to me when it's the third period and when it's a tie game. Like, this wasn't a game that was out of reach where it's like, whatever, we're just going to mail in the last 20. It's a 2-2 game, and you just completely no-show the third period. Like, it's it's so baffling. And Brian, you're right. It's like even if execution is off or your line combinations don't have chemistry or whatever, like just pure effort will get you a handful of shots. Like that should be the absolute bare minimum. And it's like, yeah, losing battles, losing foot races, it's all just effort stuff that should always be there, especially in a tie game on home ice.
And they got outshot and outplayed in the first period too. They got outshot in the first period 9-7. And so when you really break down the game, the Bruins had a good first 4.5 minutes of the second. And in that time, they took the lead. So again, they take the lead 2-1. They get outshot 24 the rest of the way. And the first period, they get outplayed. So look, I know it's easy to sit here and say it's not Monty's. For the record, I think a lot of people who are saying the Bruins probably need a coaching change, I think maybe more than half of those people are at the same time saying it's not Monty's fault, but the GM's not going to fire the roster, and the easy play is to fire the coach, right? And that's the quickest way to maybe try to salvage the season. Montgomery, if you're the Bruins and you don't think you're going to re-sign Montgomery after this year, and it's an opportunity to salvage a season right now, and you have trust in some of his assistant coaches or whatever, like, you know, it might seem inevitable. But if you're the players, guys, I was asked this question yesterday, and it's a good question. If you're the players, what do you think the problem is? What do you think is going wrong? If you're a player right now, it's easy for a fan in the media to say, well, it's all these things and it's the coaching. If you're a player, a Bruins player, I think the first thing is to be looking at yourself in the mirror, because that's, I think, where the problems really start. But let's be realistic. You're Brandon Carlo, or you're, David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle. You're sitting in the locker room at Warrior before practice today, and player to player, like, no coaches are around. What do you think they're saying to each other? Like, yeah, I think the problem is this, because I can assure you guys those conversations probably happen. And I guess I'll just give a quick answer to it, but I think a lot of it starts with a lack of confidence. I think when you're playing this poorly, you're lacking confidence in a major way. And I think there is actually one category the Bruins are number one in the league in this year, and I think it's overthinking. I think their overthinking per 60 is through the roof, and I think that stems from a lack of confidence. And I think that you have a coaching staff who wants the team to make plays with the puck on their stick and look for quality over quantity. And I respect the hell out of the mindset there from the coaches. I do get that. But it does go against a lot of your instincts as a player, because when you have the puck on your stick in the ozone, if there's not an obvious play to make, your thought is to kind of hold on to it and get it to a safe area or get it on net. And, the Bruins coaching staff, I think, values scoring on primary shots. And to score on a primary shot, in their mind, it has to be a quality shot. But I think the reality is most goals are scored in rebounds, scrums, and plays that happen due to getting the puck on net. Like, you get the puck on net, you get the defense turning around, you get the opposition playing defense, and they're scrambling. Then those passing lanes open for those primary looks to score on. So it's almost like they want to get the results without the high percentage process of getting it. And I think it's leading to the Bruins players overthinking. What do the coaches want us to do? Where are we supposed to be? And when you're overthinking, you're not playing. You're reactionary. So I apologize if I took some of your answers, but maybe you guys can think of others. Like, if you're the Bruins players, what is going wrong right now in your mind?
Well, I mean, you have to start by just like controlling what you can control, and one of those things is intensity. Your practice intensity, you can control that level. You can manufacture some energy that way, and then you hope that once you get that down, it translates into game intensity. So yeah, Brian, you took a lot of them, but being more intense and being and obviously simplifying too, like you said, no more overthinking or minimize the overthinking, the time that it takes to process and see the play in front of you. But I think a lot of this gets solved with just being more intentional with your energy and your intensity, especially in practice. It doesn't take anything for you to go out there and practice and set the right mentality, because then that usually leads to more confidence. So it's all about correcting that.
Yeah, and like that is absolutely where it has to start. It's like I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record, but it's like if you just work hard, like the other stuff's gonna start coming. And it feels like this team is like they're like the employee that has like a good productive morning to start the day and then just like mails it in after lunch. And it's like, no, like you actually have to keep doing it, and then you have to do it 5 days a week. And like it just has to be every day. It can't be like, I had a good day yesterday, I'm just gonna, I'll just cruise around out here today. Like, nope, that's how you end up following up a good game with a bad game. Like that's why this team is so inconsistent. Yeah, I do wonder if if you're Montgomery, and maybe he already has tried this, but is the next step to almost like undercoach, right? Like, do you just tell players go out there and play? Like, because I do think at times this year it has looked like part of the problem and part of the overthinking is, what am I supposed to do here? Like, what did we practice? Where is my teammate supposed to be type of thing? And if that's just not coming naturally to guys, like maybe you do almost like unplug for a couple games and be like, guys, just go out. You've played hockey your whole life. Go out, play hockey, trust your instincts, and like see what happens. Now, of course, if that's a disaster, then that looks even worse on Montgomery, because now you're like, oh, you weren't even coaching them, like, that type of thing. Brian, you mentioned, working, working for shots, and Montgomery, it reminded me, Montgomery said last week, in terms of like offensively, why they're not creating enough chances. And he said, we're not going to the hard areas enough. And I asked like what that looks like. Like, is it just, an effort thing, or like, is it not being ready to shoot? Like, what's leading to that? And he said, and he pointed out, like, he actually wants him taking more shots that aren't those perfect shots, because he said he sees times where forwards are going to the front of the net and defensemen aren't shot ready. And so the forwards aren't getting rewarded for getting there. Like, the puck isn't coming in. And so that's definitely part of it. Like, I feel like they tried to, at the start of the season, for defensemen to shoot more, and you saw it at times. And now it feels like that has too often been lacking again, where defensemen are getting the puck at the point and they're holding and they're looking for the next pass and they're going D to D instead of just firing on net. And again, like sometimes it's hard, for the casual viewer, and like even for myself at times, it's like you really only notice if someone's at the net front when there's a shot, because you notice if there's a screen or someone there for a rebound. And we probably don't pay attention enough to, like, was someone parked out front and, taking a cross check and the puck just never got there, and then they had to move out or cycle around or whatever. And it seems like Montgomery thinks that is happening, where like there are forwards going there, but the puck isn't going there.
Yeah, I feel like Hampus Lindholm is the one guy that has been consistent with getting pucks to the net, and he's been rewarded for it. And yeah, I mean, I can think of plenty of times where Elias Lindholm has been like top of the crease and waiting for either to tip it or try to grab a rebound, and the puck just doesn't seem to make its way in that direction. And Tyler Johnson is someone
moral of the story, they need more Lindholms.
They already have two. But when they're out on the ice together, maybe that's key. I mean, they were on the same 3-person unit for overtime. But if Hampus shoots and Elias stands out front and gets a tip on it, that'd be great. That'd be what the Bruins are looking for. And Tyler Johnson, I think, obviously he's only been on the team for a few games. I see him going to those areas all the time. And he's one of the smaller guys on the ice, but he goes right there. He kind of sometimes gets beaten up a little bit when he does, but he seems to find himself there, and he has gotten rebounds and gotten chances because he goes to the to the posts and to the crease, and he's kind of a pest in that area, and that's exactly why they added him.
Yeah, exactly, Bridget. He's a smart player. He knows that less is more. And Hampus Lindholm, he's been a positive sign, I would say, the last handful of games. He's been good. He's been jumping into the play, cutting off plays, rim around the boards from in the offensive zone from the opponent, keeping plays alive, taking the puck to the net. And I think that's a small positive as well in the last little stretch here. Is you have had some of the Bruins higher end players getting on the score sheet. Bridget, you mentioned Zaka earlier. Marchand's been getting some points here. Lindholm's been around it, but yeah, I feel like shots getting through from the point. Great point, Scott. No pun intended. But I feel like a lost art is like the 5-on-5 D-to-D one-timer in the offensive zone. Like I was watching I came across like a Bruins Maple Leafs game from like 2006, and this was like we're talking like Jason York, Andrew Alberts. Like it wasn't, it wasn't really maybe the first year of Dennis Weidman. It wasn't the greatest of decors, but even then, it's like I'm watching some of the highlights, and it's like a 5-on-5 offensive. Palmera was on the team. It's like a 5-on-5 in zone faceoff win, D-to-D one-timer on net, scramble in front, rebound goal. It's like there's just hockey is like I think it's a sport that is best described as like chaotic. Like I think in today's NHL, I think there's a lot of focus and emphasis on on hockey being a science and very pretty plays, especially at the highest level because everybody can make plays. But that's like it's like driving on the highway and being like, all right, I'm just gonna drive in the middle lane and I'm just gonna go 65 the whole time, and I'm gonna have a nice comfortable ride. Well, what happens when some asshole starts tailgating you on Route 3 or 95, and they're trying to go 90 in the middle lane, and you have
that person's spot. You
have emergency vehicles coming. You got to move over. You have people in front of you driving onto the speed. Like it's you have to be able to react to what's going on around you. And I feel like the Bruins are kind of just like being too stubborn. Like no, just you have to just like it's a game where you have to put yourself in a position to succeed. So that's just like simple plays, getting pucks deep and getting them to the net. And I just feel like the Bruins are like they're expecting to implement this like game plan that they're going over in film and practice. It's just not reality. Like opportunities present themselves in hockey just by doing the right thing. And I don't know, guys. I feel like, Scott, to your point about Monty, like just letting him play on instincts, and then if that goes wrong, I think that has to happen because I don't think Montgomery and company should necessarily be fired, right now based on what's happened so far this season. But I think if this continues for a little bit here, and they just keep rolling out McAvoy in the top power play, and their forecheck structure remains passive rather than aggressive. Like a lot of times on the forecheck, you have F2 or F3, like they're not going hard in because they're being told to try to anticipate the next pass and intercept it. But players aren't going to make mistakes in the NHL if there's not enough pressure on them. And so I feel like the coaching staff in Montgomery as the head of it, they need to stop being stubborn and try to make some serious adjustments here at 5-on-5 and on the penalty kill. Because if they don't make those adjustments or try to, and the team keeps playing uninspired and losing hockey, well, now you're going to get fired because you're not making coaching adjustments enough. So I'm not calling for Monty's job right now based on the first month of the season. But if he doesn't make changes or try to, well, now it's like, okay, but now you're not doing your job to try to coach the team that's in front of you. It's not working. Make some changes. Try to, because to keep things status quo and expect different results, that's not the right way.
Yeah, the power play is the big one where, like, I feel like we saw one game, I think, of Hampus Lindholm on the top unit instead of McAvoy. And then they went back, and it's like, maybe you have to do that a little longer. Maybe you have to change something else up. Maybe you find a way to get Tyler Johnson on that top unit. Like, I know Bridget brought that up before. Like, something different, because it's still not working. And like, that's, the penalty kill, I think some of that can get fixed by just staying out of the box and putting less stress on it. The power play is the big one. Like, it just can't be a negative night after night. Like, you need, again, I mentioned, like, they actually are breaking even 5-on-5. If you were just a good special teams team, or even just breaking even there, like, you'd probably have a couple more wins that have been losses instead. And they're in a part of the schedule here where there's some winnable games. Like, I mentioned this last week, and now they're 1-1 to kind of start this stretch. But St. Louis Tuesday night is a team that's struggling. A tough one against Dallas on Thursday. That's kind of the one standout. But then you get St. Louis again at home on Saturday, Columbus at home, Utah at home, who, you saw when they were off to a hot start. They have come back to earth quite a bit since then. So maybe they look like a different team. Detroit, who I'm not impressed with. Like, if you just get not completely right, but just like find a little bit of a level and some solid ground, like, you should be able to pick up some points here and start to feel a little better about yourself. But whether they can do that remains to be seen. They haven't given us a whole heck of a lot of reasons to believe that this team can, like, string together 3 or 4 games in a row, because they haven't done it yet.
The rest of the month, it's not their most difficult stretch of the schedule. I mean, even just like, I was looking at tickets to get for some of my family members, and you can tell normally by the price. At TD Garden, you're normally not getting tickets below $100, but pretty sure that Columbus game, you can get them for like $40. Normally that's a sign that it's a team that isn't competitive that the Bruins are playing against. So there are definitely some chances to win in there and build confidence and get things right. I think those St. Louis games and the Columbus game, for sure, I would mark as fitting the bill for them to try to gain confidence back. So even though, and I'll bring this back to what Brian's opening shift was, looking for some silver lining and looking for some positives. If they can win those games against St. Louis and Columbus, they're back over 500. And then by the time Thanksgiving comes around, they're in a playoff spot if they can get those wins that they need to. And normally that means the rest of the way, like, you're setting yourself up for a good position to still make the playoffs, even though they haven't necessarily looked like a Stanley Cup playoff team for chunks of the season so far. So maybe we're talking less about this in early December, not having the same conversations as we're having now a month from now.
And Bridget and Scott, again, based off of last game alone, that dreadful last 35 plus minutes of the game, you have people in the media. You also have a lot of fans that are saying, like, love Monty, not his fault, maybe a little bit his fault, but something's got to give because you can't fire the team. And clearly Scott's going to practice in less than an hour. Monty will be running that practice, so it looks like he's survived that game. But you guys mentioned some winnable games here: Columbus, St. Louis twice. If those go south, I mean, you have other fans that say, "Don't fire Monty. What's going to change if you do? It's not his fault. It's Sweeney's fault. It's the player's fault. Blah blah blah." Like, but at the end of the day, we all know it's a pecking order business. Sweeney's not going to fire himself. He's not going to fire the players. So, Bridget and Scott, if these next 2-3 games go south, and by south I mean looks more the same, uninspired, losing to bad teams, like, eventually, right? I mean, this might be a conversation for a podcast later this week or next week if these games do go south. But it's like, at some point something has to give if they don't turn things around, because you can't wait half the season if they're playing like this the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the flip side. Is I'm saying, like, these should be winnable games where you can start to feel good. If you don't, if you keep playing like this and now you're losing to like legitimately bad teams, yeah, it absolutely feels like that would have to be some sort of breaking point. But yeah, as you mentioned, Brian, I do have to get running for practice. So I think that wrapped up, any of my thoughts. I don't know if you guys had any closing thoughts.
Don't think so.
Nope. I'm good. So thank you all very much for listening. We will talk to you on Wednesday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.